there, people, and welcome to Rauta City 5. 5 different releases, 5 various styles. Once again, going through alphabetical order and giving them a fair, even if short, review. Now, all of these releases which I have in my hand, except for one, are somewhat older. That is, a few months, to say the least. Some are all as old as 2021, but 2020 that is. But there is one release from this particular summer, and I wanted to include because it's kind of short and sweet, and that it's the EP here. But let's go in alphabetical order and go through these various releases. First, we have Atheos with Words of Eroding Worlds. It has kind of a rather peculiar cover with this person covered in, I would say, leaflets or pages. By this cover alone, you couldn't really decide what kind of album we're talking about. Now, to be honest, I wasn't sure entirely, based on one spin, what this is all about. Then, like 4 spins later, I was ready to give my verdict, and this is very, very peculiar case because it's not, in fact, a good album. To be honest, I find this very, very mediocre. That is not bad, but not really good either. And the thing here is, these guys are rather original with their style, so let's give it kudos for that. This band from Ireland has now 2 albums out, and this is the second one. Now the thing here is, Metal Archives describes this as technical death metal, which is somewhat true, but I wouldn't go with that. I would say this is kind of experimental death metal, which is a little bit different. First of all, this is not that technical all the way through as one might imagine based on description technical death metal. Surely there are parts where the band goes somewhat weird and kind of a jazz-like, but be progressive or technical death metal, in my opinion, are not something that I would describe, because that takes you to a different place, bands like Archpie and Origin and like. The other thing is, this is not very violent or aggressive and speedy, that is not dominated by fast tempo and all that stuff, which is then again something that you often describe these more brutal death metal bands. Then again, also being technical at the same time, you know, having a lot of different things going on with technical parts, both in guitar and drums, and well, maybe bass as well. But this is more about experimentation, in my opinion, and lasts for some 60 minutes, almost, give or take. And through that an hour, the band kind of goes with various ideas, which some are better and some are kind of like, why? And that's where it kind of gets all complicated. Now, the vocals are growlier, most parts, but they're kind of screamier parts as well, and none of that is really, really good. It's very mediocre, as if the band was just, okay, we're done pretty much, go home. Oh yeah, we need to add those vocals, just add them and get the shit out of here. And I don't know, I would be expecting so much more when it comes to death metal. More power, more brutality, more aggressiveness, more something, more violence, I don't know. But this is lacking that part. Now, that wouldn't be a problem if only the songs were good, but they are not. It's more like the band is lacking the ability to create really interesting riffs or memorable parts or just, you know, captivating songwriting, all that. And now it seems it's like going too much into different places, and that combined with rather what I would call weak sound, especially when we're talking about death metal, really, I don't know. I'm not gonna say it's a bad one. Like I said, it's mediocre one, and maybe it's just for marginal people by marginal people. So I kind of like that they're doing something else, something different than your typical death metal band, but it doesn't mean it's good. So I cannot really recommend it to too many people. But if you want something else from your death metal, that is a good way to go. Then we go to Sweden with a band called Belarus, Beaver, with the second release called as Planet of Beavers. Now, Metal Archives lists this one as a full-length album, but I'm not too sure about it because this is less than 20 minutes, even though it features 12 tracks. Now, given that this one is not mentioned on the label's website, it's hard to really confirm whether this is an MCD or full album. I guess it doesn't really matter if you like the music, because, you know, MCD or an album. If it gives you the kicks, that's what matters. Now, this one is deathgrind. It's very grindtastic in many parts, has kind of a brutal and powerful sound, and obviously vocals that really fit the theme here. Now, given that this is kind of a choking band, you know, the kind of a tongue in the cheek kind of stuff, now that might be a mood killer for some people. But if you like bands such as, you know, Cannabis Corpse, doing their kind of a weed version of Cannibal Corpse, you know, kind of a brutal death metal, then you can pretty much handle this. Now, this is a band with a lot of potential, but in fact, I think the songwriting is a little bit sloppy. Not sloppy in the sense like they play bad, but more like they could have put more effort into songwriting those compositions as well. Obviously, when tracks, I mean, there are 12 tracks, go through in 19 minutes, you pretty much can figure it's not, you know, in order to create those 3, 4, 5-minute songs, but, you know, kind of a fast in and out, and that's it. So, in case you need a kind of a little dose of deathgrind with powerful sound, but not that much originality, albeit for the Belarus thing here, this is something worth checking out. Not very good, but kind of okay. From the same label, as far as I could tell, it comes from Beyond Catacombs with Interstellar Burial. Now, this is a full-length album, even though this one has 7 tracks only, and this is more on the dark brutality, a little bit akin to what Cannibal Corpse are doing. I wouldn't really say these are similar artists, but roughly, give or take, the style is somewhat the same. Now, at some points, this band has the kind of a groove you would expect from the more brutal death metal bands, but sometimes it gets a little bit lost along the way, like having some weirder part of riffs. Not maybe the Atheos kind of riffs, but still kind of similar thing going on. Maybe it's because only 2 guys, and sometimes it's like somebody needs to kick them in the butt. But I don't know, this is rather potential band, actually sounding quite powerful, sounds like some of those bigger bands, powerful vocals, powerful production overall, and mostly rather nice ideas. Some parts are, once again, better than the rest, so it's a little bit mix of good ideas and somewhat mediocre plus ideas. Something like decent meaning good, and the overall is in the middle. An interesting release, maybe even the best on this batch of Indie 5, so definitely worth checking out in case you're looking for some brutal death metal. Then we have a rather peculiar case. This comes from France. It's Malefice. I don't know, Malefice, how to pronounce it. And dernier, drapeau. Sorry, pardon. French is not exactly my forte. This is something like a black metal album about UFO Nazis. Those Nazis on the darker side of the moon. Well, something in that direction. Occult, mythological, having Nazis, having historical figures or whatever, and yeah, UFOs. You got it. Kind of a peculiar release in that sense. Now, this is closer to 1 hour or so not exactly one of those easiest albums to go through, but in case you like the style, which is something like melodic black metal, having a little bit epic sense in the music, this might be your cup of tea. Now, I basically like the idea that when bands are creating something weird, even some goofy stuff, but to be honest, this kind of lacks the execution. That is, it could be so much better, but it's like missing the finishing touch, if you will. The songwriting is pretty decent, and you're kind of expecting something like, okay, this will be something very majestic, something really epic, something catchy with the melodic parts and all that, but it kind of leaves you waiting. And by the time the album is done, you're pretty much like, yeah, okay, I could give it another go, but I'm not fully in love just yet. And for me anyway, after a few spins, I couldn't find the love. So once again, I'm kind of intrigued this idea to do something different. Once again, much like Atheos, but very different style. But this is not just, breaking the ground, blowing my mind, or doing all that fancy stuff. Interesting idea, but not fully convinced on the execution. Last but not least, we have a split that features Finnish band Templar and Japanese band Barbatos. Those who know what Barbatos is all about, it's kind of a speed metal meeting heavy metal meeting black metal. Speed black is something that I would describe this overall. Now, this features just 4 songs, 2 songs by either bands. and they're roughly the same style. Now, Templar's way of doing is way more chaotic. I guess less heavy metal oriented, or less heavy metal driven, I guess would be the more accurate term. But they kind of have the chaotic aggressiveness, which saves so much. Whereas Barbatos is more about catchier riffs, catchier parts, almost like creating hit songs, but with kind of a Japanese weird perverted twist. This comes as a nuclear piece yellow, as you can see. That is, I guess, the official definition for this color. So it's kind of a cool. And there's nothing but this kind of a very, very simple design for the booklet. No lyrics whatsoever. So it's pretty much go with the feeling, go with your guts. In case you are a sucker for these kind of limited edition releases and you like the barbaric output by either of the bands previously, well, I think this is something you should consider going for. Now, this is once again nothing new and groundbreaking as such, but if you like your music dirty, barbaric, and kind of a speedy, and then going on this black metal filler, this is definitely your stuff. Not for everybody, guaranteed. This is way too dirty and trashy for a lot of people, but still, there is something interesting with this kind of stuff. Good for beer drinking, if not anything else. So, 5 different releases of various places, various styles. You should get the idea. You will find all the links provided in the description box so you can start clicking and listening to any of these bands, whether you like it or not. So, there you go. I hope you will find something interesting there, and should you have any comments or questions, put them on the comment box below and I will get back to you. Meanwhile, take care and see you soon with more Rauta stuff coming your way.